Well, as you know, the media across Australia and in parts of the world has been dominated over the last days by what will now be known as the Berejiklian affair. I'll come to that in a moment. The New South Wales government is relatively young in that an election isn't due until 2023. They run for fixed terms. In the wake of the Gladys Berejiklian resignation, Andrew Constance has now indicated he will run for the federal seat of Gilmore, and John Barilaro, the Deputy Premier, fighting an appalling defamation case as a result of things said about him on social media. The Deputy Premier this morning announced he too would be going. Politicians get very little credit, and many would say that the way the voter is treated, they perhaps don't deserve much credit. But in relation to Constance and Barilaro, I remember them well from those awful bushfires and indeed the drought. They were in the middle of Andrew Constance's electorate. I remember flying to Bega at Christmas time, or Bateman's Bay, in 2019 because I was genuinely concerned about the health of Andrew Constance. The plight of people suffering around him had taken its toll. I sensed that from the messages he was sending me. I flew to see him, and Peter Credlin and I did our TV show from there. I put on a dinner for the fire victims from Bateman's Bay who wanted to come, and told them eat as much as you like and drink as much as you like. But even then, the clothes they were wearing belonged to someone else. John Barilaro is the son of immigrant parents who were born in Italy. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's been a genuine representative of the areas west of the Great Dividing Range. We've had a lot of conversations, the drought, the bushfires, the virus. They affected him enormously. Whatever else might be the reasons for his leaving, he's fundamentally worn out. People who give such service deserve our appreciation. Tonight, I feel obligated, though, to comment on the Berejiklian resignation. That much of what I will say, I have said many times before. It's a bit like talking into an empty tank. Forget the politics and what side you're on. I've been raising matters about ICAC for many years now. I'll come to that in a moment. But the public are entitled to ask, as I wrote in October last year, when Gladys Berejiklian's private life was splashed across the media, have we embraced stupidity over common sense? I said then, and I'll say it again, whatever Gladys has or hasn't done, her private life is no business of ours. It is our business if, as an elected representative, she has allowed her private life to interfere with the responsible exercise of her elected responsibilities. To date, there has been no proof of that. Assertions, yes, but no proof. And now because she's being investigated, an Australian citizen, it doesn't matter if she's a premier or a plumber. She's lost her job, lost her income, lost her vocation, and for some who might believe the headlines, lost her reputation. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. There must be something going on here. Let me be blunt. As I've said many times, it is not Gladys Berejiklian who should be in the dock, but ICAC itself. Yes, we do need a body to investigate corruption in public office. But in many ways, the former Premier has been hoisted on her own petard. I can't remember how many times, through interviews and correspondence, and Gladys would testify to this, that I have sought to persuade her government to reform the ICAC machinery. This is an outfit that seems to thrive on the blood sport of destroying the reputations of high-profile people. Ask the former Emergency Services Commissioner Murray Keir. ICAC found him corrupt. Thankfully, he was able to get into a court of law. Many can't. The magistrate demolished the credibility of ICAC. Ask the gifted former Deputy Senior Crown Prosecutor of New South Wales, Margaret Cunneen. She had to go all the way to the High Court to clear her name of ICAC damage and invention. Ask the very fine former New South Wales Police Minister, Michael Gallagher. He was addressing a passing out parade of new police recruits at Goulburn when he was interrupted by his Chief of Staff with the astonishing message, Minister, you've just been called corrupt at ICAC. His reputation was gone. Like Gladys Berejiklian, he lost his job, lost his income. His family suffered unbelievably. There is a stack of such people. Ask the former Liberal MP Mari Fakara, the former Liberal candidate Bart Bassett. Yesterday, the former Liberal MP for Charlestown near Newcastle, Andrew Cornwall, argued that ICAC's public hearing system wielded too much power and caused collateral damage to innocent witnesses and allowed, quote, mud to stick even if allegations were never proven, unquote. Mr Cornwall was an up-and-coming, very respectable star of the district and of the Liberal Party when he too was forced to resign in 2014 amid an ICAC inquiry. Mr Cornwall said it took 4 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to clear his name after being accused and then cleared of any wrongdoing. But as he said, the mud sticks. Then there's the reputable Sydney businessman Sharif Ghazal. Gladys Berejiklian was in possession of a report, which I regularly reminded her of, by the former reputable New South Wales judge and former ICAC inspector John Nicholson. The Berejiklian government has had that report since June 2017, re Operation Vesta, concerning Sharif Kazal. The Nicholson report recommended an exoneration protocol for innocent victims of ICAC, like Sharif Kazal, whose reputations are trashed by headlines, photographers and ICAC. Judge John Nicholson is a former inspector of ICAC. He made a 110-page report to Parliament, re Sharif Kazal, which stated that ICAC had no evidence of any wrongdoing in its possession, either before, during or after the Kazal case. If no evidence existed, surely no public inquiry was warranted. Lawyers for Kazal warned ICAC of this overreach, operating outside their legislative powers. This was 2 years before the Margaret Cunneen fiasco. But as I kept reminding Gladys, her government was in possession of 2 separate reports from the inspector of ICAC, one for the Margaret Cunneen case, the other for Kazal. Both were heavily critical of ICAC, exceeding its legislative powers in pursuit of individuals. ICAC spent millions of dollars wrongfully pursuing Kazal, and the DPP had to repeatedly advise ICAC that there was no evidence of any wrongdoing. So, no case to be made. If the DPP says you don't have any evidence, how does ICAC justify destroying someone's reputation? But instead of ICAC being held accountable for breaching their legislative powers, after the Cunneen High Court victory, the Baird government, and Gladys was a member of that cabinet, legislated to deny justice to the people ICAC had wronged. The government legislated that anyone previously found corrupt had no right to challenge that decision in a court of law and have it overturned. The inspector of ICAC, John Nicholson, reported the Kazal case to Parliament on June 28, 2017. His 110-page report outlined the injustice done to Kazal, and one of the key recommendations was for an exoneration protocol. The previous inspector, David Levine, also a former judge, also recommended the implementation of an exoneration protocol. That is, if these people are innocent, state that they're innocent. I wrote endless letters to Premiers Baird and Berejiklian, and they promised in return that justice would be afforded to anyone wronged by ICAC. There is a committee of the Parliament which has an overview of ICAC. I wrote to them in August last year about these issues. I indicated to the committee in writing that Michael Baird, when he was Premier, gave me the assurance, I quote his exact words, if anyone's been wronged by ICAC, ICAC will be held accountable. Gladys promised me in 2018, quote, our ICAC committee, the parliamentary committee, is looking at ways in which we can ensure that people who've been through the process and exonerated somehow get justice, unquote. Can you believe there is no exoneration protocol? They find you guilty, you stay guilty. In fact, earlier this year, we had the then Director of Public Prosecutions, Lloyd Babb, a senior counsel, telling a New South Wales parliamentary committee looking into the impact that an adverse finding by ICAC can have on someone's life, the then DPP made the astonishing confession to the parliamentary committee that shaming, quote, was clearly intended by Parliament, both as a deterrent and a form of punishment. Any reputational impact is a necessary and intended consequence of ICAC exercising its functions, unquote. So he's arguing that inherent in the ICAC legislation, and doesn't Gladys now know it, was the intention to destroy people's reputation, whether they are innocent or not. His words, quote, an adverse finding can have significant effect on a person's reputation and life. Such effect was clearly intended by Parliament, both as a deterrent and a form of punishment for undesirable conduct in the public sphere. Any reputational impact, he said, is a necessary and intended consequence of ICAC exercising its functions. As I've indicated to you, people like Murray Keir, Margaret Cunneen, Sharif Kazal, these people were innocent, but the reputational impact was appallingly damaging. There was no evidence of misconduct against Margaret Cunneen. Her family suffered a nightmare. Her husband urged the Parliamentary Committee on ICAC that, quote, you recommend that everyone whose reputation has been adversely affected by ICAC's habit of publicly humiliating people in advance of any adverse finding should receive the benefit of an unqualified public exoneration and, if appropriate, an apology. Margaret Cunneen, Michael Gallagher, Sharif Kazal, Jeff McCloy, Andrew Kelly, Andrew Cornwall, the list is endless. And now the woman who's dedicated her life to the service of New South Wales has lost everything, charged with nothing. I suspect she doesn't even know what the charges are. She's being investigated. Well, I've argued for years that the process is wrong. This stuff should be done in camera. That is, in layman's language, behind closed doors. Not leaking to the media, so there'll be photographers everywhere waiting for the arrival of the next victim. In camera, it's called the Hong Kong model. By all means, wheel someone in if there's a suspicion of questionable behaviour in public office. Hear the evidence. ICAC has no prosecutorial powers. If need be, submit the evidence to the DPP, where I might add the DPP can't rely on the same evidence given to ICAC. Then if the DPP finds sufficient evidence, then name and publicly charge the person. Until that time, their innocence must be protected. Where is the protection of innocence in this process? Gladys Berejiklian has been charged with nothing. She may never be. She's lost her job, her income, her vocation, her pride and her reputation. She's had her private life disgracefully paraded in the public place. I repeat what I've said many times. The most important investigation that needs to take place, and the new government of New South Wales should begin it immediately, and I have written to that extent today, if it is to be Dominic Perrottet, and it should enjoy bipartisan support, and that is to reform the ICAC process. It is a fundamental principle of Western democracy that people are innocent until they're proven guilty. Not with ICAC. We need an investigative body, but not this kind of outfit. Quite frankly, the way this business has been handled, Berejiklian, along with a raft of others before her, deserve a public apology. The real tragedy is, I did warn Gladys to change the process to defend people's innocence, and her government did nothing about it. It is a sadness that she is now veritably hoisted on her own petard.